Twins can share a bond so deep it defies explanation. You grow up side by side, face the world together, and become more like one soul split into two. That's how it was with my brother and I, until everything changed. Because slowly, he became someone else. Or something else. Something dark, unrecognizable, and horrifying. Growing up, my brother Owen and I were extremely close. Not only with each other, but with our parents and the rest of our family. We grew up in a nice enough neighborhood where we spent the summers exploring, swimming at the beach, and playing sports. We even had a solid group of friends who we both got along with. But even with all the people we met, the friends we made, Owen and I were the closest. One summer, Owen and I had a soccer tournament out of town. It was an annual tournament, one we both looked forward to all year. But when that time came around, Owen had just started to get sick, a stomach bug or something. I offered to stay home with him, but he insisted I go. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but we never have been apart for more than a day, and with this tournament, we'd be apart for an entire week. Our team got silver in that tournament, and the week flew by. But shortly after returning home, Owen started to change. He became closed off, distant from our parents, from our friends, and even me. He didn't want to go swimming anymore. He wouldn't even play video games or watch movies with me, things we always used to do. I was confused. We'd only been apart for a week. How could he grow so distant so fast? I started to wonder if he was mad at me, resentful that I had went to the tournament without him, even though he told me to. I brought it up to him more than once, told him straight up how he was acting strange, how hurt I felt, like I'd lost the person who knew me better than anyone else. But he just brushed it off, laughed like I was being dramatic. Told me I was imagining things. That hurt worse, because I was clearly upset, and part of me swore he could see that. But he didn't care. In fact, I started to think he liked seeing me that way. But as the weeks passed, he became more and more closed off. Eventually, he stopped coming to school with me. I'd walk alone, sit in class alone, worrying about my brother. Because of his absence, his grades started to slip. This caused a massive rift between him and my parents. The arguing between them was almost non-stop, but Owen didn't seem bothered. He reacted to my parents the same way he did to me, dismissive, cold, and heartless. And things kept getting worse. Owen started hanging out with a new group of people I'd never even heard of. Total strangers. I'd hear him leave the house in the middle of the night. Sometimes he wouldn't come back for days. But when he did, he'd go straight to his room before I even got a look at him. Then, one night, the cops showed up at our front door with Owen. He'd been arrested for trespassing. They told my parents he'd been spending time with a group of people much older, and they were into some weird things. They didn't explain what that meant, but apparently the charges were serious enough that after court he had to wear an ankle monitor for a month. At first, my parents and I thought maybe this could be a good thing. Maybe if he had to stay in the house, spend time with us, the old Owen would come back. That's what we hoped for anyway. But it's not what happened. The ankle monitor did more harm than good. His arguments with my parents only became more frequent and more intense. Sometimes they even teetered on the edge of violent. I stayed in my room when they'd happen. Hearing him yell, realizing how much he had changed in such a short amount of time was too painful. I hate to admit it, but when his ankle monitor came off, a small part of me felt relieved. See, it had gotten so intense, his behavior so unhinged. For the first time in my life, I actually felt scared of him, a feeling I never thought I would have of my own brother. But one night I heard him leave, and he never came back. My parents and I were completely distraught. The police put out some feelers, but told us this was a common occurrence with people his age. Running away, that is. They told us his new group of friends were probably part of the problem, that he'd most likely turn up in a couple of weeks once he realized the mistake he'd made. But 3 weeks passed and he didn't return. My parents went through his room to check if there was anything that could help us find him, but instead what they found made things worse. Hidden under his mattress were books. Satanic books. Spell books, I guess. Under the books were 2 burlap sacks. One held broken pieces of a mirror. The other had what looked like human hair. The entire vibe in the house changed. We were shocked that in under 2 months, our once happy, tight-knit and loving family had been ripped apart into something unrecognizable, devoid of all the things we loved so much. But little did we know, soon that emptiness, that sadness, would morph into paranoia and terror. One morning I stepped out the front door to feed our cat, Simon. Normally he's there waiting at 8 a.m. This morning, though, there was no sign of him. This wasn't completely out of the ordinary, though, because in the summer he did disappear for days and rarely liked being inside. But another week passed, and we never saw Simon again. A week later, I was in my room studying for a test when I heard a sound. Faint, but familiar. At first I couldn't place it, but then it clicked. A bell. The small bell that used to hang from Simon's collar. And it was coming from just outside my window. Heart racing, I jumped up and slid the window open, expecting to see him sitting on the windowsill like nothing happened. But he wasn't there, and the sound had stopped. I leaned out the window, scanning the darkness, but the backyard was silent and still. But something about it felt wrong. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it. That horrible, crawling feeling you get when you know you're being watched. Then, suddenly, the bell again. This time closer. I looked down, and hanging from a nail just below my window was a collar. Simon's collar. Only it wasn't blue like it was supposed to be. It was red and wet. I grabbed it instinctively but dropped it almost right away. It was soaked, dripping, and the smell. A metallic, unmistakable smell. It was blood. All at once it hit me. I let out an instinctual scream, and shortly after my parents burst through my bedroom door. I couldn't speak, I just pointed at the collar, wide-eyed. They both stepped forward and examined it. Then they shot each other a concerned look. "Sorry, hun," my mom said. "It must have been a fox or a coyote." I was absolutely beside myself, distraught. With everything happening, Owen's disappearance, life had become just gray, joyless, depressing even. This probably goes without saying, but that night I couldn't sleep. My mind raced, replaying everything that had happened in the recent months. But there was something else. A faint scratching noise and the slightest smell of something burning, almost like campfire. At first I listened closely, trying to figure out where it was coming from. Then the scratching turned into more of a shuffling sound. I climbed out of bed and put my ear against the floor. Sure enough, the noise became more clear. Whatever was making it had to have been larger. It certainly didn't sound like a squirrel or a chipmunk. By the way, I should probably mention our house doesn't have a basement. It has a tight crawl space that you can only enter through a small door outside at the back of the house. When I was young, we had a problem with small animals getting in. Foxes, raccoons, that kind of thing. I figured that's probably what it was. The smell was also easy to dismiss. It was almost summer. People in our neighborhood have fires in their backyards all the time. I figured some smoke maybe seeped through the window when I opened it. Anyway, I woke up the next morning late for school. But just before heading out the door, my mom yelled, "Don't forget to put out the garbage before you leave." In the backyard, there's a big wooden box with a lid that we put our garbage in. That way it doesn't sit in the house before it's picked up. I ran around back and threw it inside. But as I was closing the lid, something caught my eye. The crawlspace door. It was open slightly. Suddenly my phone went off, the alarm that lets me know that I have class in 15 minutes. I ignored the crawlspace door and booked it as fast as I could to school. That night I went to my room to finish an assignment that was due the next day. But hours later I heard the noise again, the same one from the night before. Rustling and scratching coming from directly below my floor. Then I remembered, the crawlspace door. I guess curiosity beat the boredom of doing homework because I grabbed a small, cheap, almost dead flashlight from my desk drawer and headed outside. I made my way to the back of the house, and that's when I saw it. The crawlspace door was now open wider. Not fully open, but just enough that something could have slipped inside. I crouched closer, lowering the flashlight as I put my hand on top of the small hatch door. That's when I noticed it. A faint flickering glow. A glow coming from somewhere deep inside the crawlspace. I knelt down and hesitated before pulling the door the rest of the way open. Inside was almost total darkness, except for that faint flickering glow at the far end. It wasn't strong, not bright enough to see much. I swallowed hard, my throat felt dry. I got a feeling telling me not to go inside, but I ignored it. I raised the dimming flashlight, dropped down on all fours, and began to crawl toward that light. The ground was cold and damp, like it had just rained, even though it hadn't. The air smelt stale, heavy with mildew and dust. As I crawled forward, the light from my flashlight illuminated the wooden beams above me, catching tiny flecks of dust and cobwebs. Every moment down there echoed. It was quiet in there, still. Halfway in, a thick cobweb stretched across my face and stuck to my skin. I jumped back, heart racing, trying to brush it off. My flashlight clattered awkwardly on the ground, and for a split second, everything went dark. But I grabbed it, hand trembling, and flicked the beam forward again. I pushed forward toward the glow, ignoring every sense in my body telling me to turn back as the large gravel stones dug into my knees. Now, only feet away, it came into view. Just enough light remained to finally make out what was casting the glow. A thick white wax candle, nearly burned down to its base. The flame flickered weakly, barely holding on. It was sitting on a small quilted blanket, a blanket I actually recognized from when Owen and I were kids. My heart started to thump harder as I slowly moved the flashlight across the rest of the blanket, and that's when I saw it. A pile of bones. They were small, pale, and brittle looking. At first I thought they might have been chicken bones, or leftovers from some animal dragging food down here. But when I saw the skull, everything inside me just stopped. It was Simon. I felt my stomach twist. My mouth went dry, then flooded with saliva as nausea surged over me. I turned my head and nearly threw up, choking back bile as I gasped for air. I backed up a few inches, trying to breathe, trying not to scream. What the hell was this? Who had done this? But then, in that panic, my flashlight caught something on the bottom of the floorboards just above my head. Lines, etched and burned directly into the wood. They weren't just drawn, they had depth. Carved in with something sharp, then scorched black. I traced the lines with my flashlight as I realized what I was looking at. It was a massive pentagram. I froze. A cold sweat broke across my back. Suddenly, I remembered the scratching. That sound I heard the night before, coming from below the floor in my room, and that awful burnt smell that I chalked up to be the neighbor's campfire. That whole time, whatever this was happening only feet below me as I sat in my room. Only the floor separating me and whatever the hell was happening down here. Panic gripped me. I needed to get out, and fast. I spun around, nearly smacking my head on the low beams above me. My flashlight shook in my hand, its dying beam sweeping widely across the crawlspace as I turned back toward the opening. But that's when the light hit something. A shape. A person. I froze again. There, just a few feet ahead of me, sitting cross-legged against one of the concrete support pillars, was Owen, my brother. He had been hidden when I crawled in, tucked on the far side of the beam. I must have passed within inches of him without realizing. But now, there he was, fully visible in the cold, dim light. He didn't say a word, didn't even flinch. He sat at a slight angle, partially turned away from me. His black hoodie was pulled up over his head, shadowing most of his face. I stayed frozen, crouched there, the beam of my flashlight now almost non-existent. Everything in me told me just to get back outside as fast as possible, but I inched forward. Just a little, just enough to get a better look. The light caught more of his face now. His skin, it was pale, almost bluish. His mouth hung open in an almost surprised expression. But the worst part were his eyes. Wide and unblinking, completely clouded over, a milky cataract white. They weren't looking at me, just staring dead ahead, like they were fixed on something that wasn't there. He wasn't moving. I couldn't even see the rise and fall of his breath. He was just still, like a corpse, like a statue. The horror of it hit me all at once. This wasn't shock. This wasn't catatonia. This looked like death. And just as that thought settled in my gut, his head twitched. A sharp, unnatural jerk, just a few degrees to the left, toward me. I sucked in a breath, but his expression didn't change. His eyes didn't move. His mouth stayed slack, hanging open like a puppet left mid-sentence. No recognition, no reaction, just that frozen, lifeless face. I scrambled backwards, nearly dropping the flashlight as I kicked up dirt and spiderwebs in a blind panic. My breathing turned frantic, chest heaving as I scurried toward the crawlspace door like something was chasing me, though I didn't dare to look back to see if it was. I burst out into the open air, gasping, legs trembling. The last sliver of daylight had vanished. Everything outside was now completely dark. I ran into the house, yelling for my parents, my voice cracking from panic. They thought I was hurt. I could see it in their eyes. But I was past making sense. I just kept shouting, "He's under the house. Owen's under the house." My dad grabbed a flashlight, told my mom to stay with me, and disappeared around back. We waited in silence. My mom kept asking questions, her voice shaking, but I couldn't answer her. I just stood at the back door, staring into the night, heart still hammering, ears still straining to hear anything. After what felt like forever, my dad finally re-emerged from behind the house. His face was pale. "He's not there," he said quietly. "Nobody is." I felt my stomach turn. "What do you mean?" I said. "I saw him. I swear I saw him." "He's gone," my dad said. "But the stuff you talked about, it's real. The bones, the candle, that symbol." He shook his head like he was trying to convince himself it was all some elaborate prank. "It's all there," he said, locking eyes with my mom. My mom covered her mouth in shock. None of us said anything for a moment. Then we heard it. A rustling just beyond the tree line, in the woods behind the house. Not a small animal. Not the wind. Something moving. Slow. Deliberate. We all turned toward the sound at the same time, but the woods were pitch black. Whatever was out there, we couldn't see it. And that was the last night we ever spoke of Owen. Hey everyone, really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like on this video. Also, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. All those things really help the video and the channel itself. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.